Welcome to CMO Confidential, the podcast that takes you inside the drama, decisions, and choices that go with being the head of marketing. Hosted by five-time CMO Mike Linton.
Typeface helps the world's biggest brands move from business brief to fully personalized campaigns in hours, not months, with its agentic AI marketing platform. They are the first enterprise platform with agentic AI marketing workflows designed to instantly automate work that used to take weeks. With Typeface, one campaign scales into thousands of personalized experiences across ads, email, and video while staying true to your brand. The company's AI native platform integrates seamlessly into your MarTech stack and marketing workflows and includes enterprise-grade security. Adweek named Typeface AI Company of the Year. Time magazine featured them as a best invention, and Fast Company called them the next big thing in tech. See how major brands like ASICS and Microsoft are transforming marketing with Typeface. Learn more at typeface.ai/CMO. Welcome, marketers, advertisers, and those who love them to Chief Marketing Officer Confidential. CMO Confidential is a program that takes you inside the drama, the decisions, and the politics that go with being the head of marketing at any company in what is one of the most scrutinized jobs in the executive suite. I'm Mike Linton, the former Chief Marketing Officer of Best Buy, eBay, Farmers Insurance, and Ancestry.com, here today with my guest, Dr. Kim Whitler. Today's topic, Colonel Mustard in the study with the job spec. How poor design shortens CMO lifespans. Now, Kim started her career at P&G and went on to be a GM of Aurora Foods and CMO of David's Bridal. She then shifted to the academic world and is now a professor at the University of Virginia Darden School of Business. She has served on a number of boards, including Kalon Aesthetics, I think I said that right, the American Marketing Association, and the AMA Foundation. She is a tireless researcher of the CMO position and just published new work on the impact of the job spec. Hint, it reinforces her earlier advice to candidates, which was throw away the job spec and write your own. She is a CMO Confidential OG as our first academic guest back in 2023. Welcome back, Kim.
Thank you, Mike. It's terrific to be here, and congratulations on all of your success. It's exciting to see.
Yeah, we're having a lot of fun. So, Kim, let's talk about this recently published work on Chief Marketing Officer role design. Tell us about the study and why you took on this project in the first place, and then how you did the research.
Okay, so first of all, I have to say thank you. You may not remember this, but I interviewed you back in the day on an early part of this research, and then subsequently interviewed over 500 different respondents. But I have you and many other people to thank for helping me kind of understand the breadth and complexity of the role. And so I also love, by the way, your intro. You made it sound super exciting. Colonel Mustard, I was talking about job specs and CMO role design. And when I was getting my PhD in my 40s, I had a professor, we're talking about role design and job structure, and the professor's like, this is the most boring topic ever. And I looked at him, I said, what are you talking about? This is stuff that you never learn about, you don't talk about, nobody teaches in school, and yet it's the infrastructure of success. It's like your skeleton. We don't think about it, but it's critical for performance. And so I love the energy. I am passionate about this because I've had a belief as a former CMO and GM that it's an overlooked topic. It's a under-researched and misunderstood thing. And that a lot of times we talk about CMO tenure, and we're not getting at what's going on. What causes CMOs to be unhappy? What causes CEOs to be unhappy with CMOs? And what can we do to identify the problems and solve them?
I think this is, and this is why we love topics like this on CMO Confidential, because it's a topic that people aren't always thinking about, but probably should. It's like the disease is that the CMO and the CEO are not actually working well together, and you're turning over people and you're not getting your most out of marketing. And the answer, the cure, is to change CMOs, when actually there's a lot of prevention that could go into this with the job spec. And I think you talked to me back when I was at Best Buy, which is a while ago. So this study is a very long study, right? Tell us how long it's been going, because it's not like some 1 year thing. It's pretty long.
No, I started this 14 years ago. Welcome to academic research. I said, there's nothing I want to spend 6 months on, let alone 14 years. But that is what you do. I've interviewed hundreds of people. I've collected job specs from CMOs, CIOs, CFOs. We've had to code and analyze the job spec. So you have to take words and convert it into spreadsheet data that you can then analyze. That takes years. We then did empirical research where we did surveys with CMOs over time to try to understand what's going on. So this is a complex set of research. And the good news is that we have a number of different publications that have come out of it. We have the current Journal of Academy of Marketing Science publication that's an academic journal. I can talk more about that later. I have an HBR. We were on the cover of HBR. I have a Sloan article that I think actually is it's high utility. I have another HBR article that's digital that is very practical. So we've got a number of different publications that if you step back and look at it in aggregate, I think it can be quite informative for CMOs, CEOs, and executive recruiters.
And we'll post those in the comments. But when I was reading the study, it showed, and this is, I think you said it's 500 interviews, 50% of roles are misaligned. I want you to talk about the misalignment, and then how is that possible? That many, it's like a random walk kind of. Tell us how this is possible.
This episode of CMO Confidential is brought to you by Typeface.
To orchestrate workflows across channels, meet Arc Agents, your AI teammates handling complexity so you can focus on what matters. All within a reimagined workspace where you and AI create as one. Spaces works the way you do. Create anything, from documents to videos to entire campaigns, at scale. Our agents help you craft campaign storyboards, powered by your Brand Hub, giving you the perfect starting point. Transform one asset into countless variations for every audience and market. Join industry leaders already reimagining their content lifecycle with Typeface. Welcome to marketing's next chapter, where every story finds its voice.
Now, back to our conversation with University of Virginia Business School professor Kim Whitler.
Okay, so let me start by, when we say misaligned, what does misalignment mean? So you're right, 54, what we found, and we only looked at 3 attributes of a role, and 54% of the roles were misaligned, which tells us that if I looked at a complete role, if we could do that in a model, we would have tremendous levels of misalignment. And why do we care about misalignment? At a simple level, the more aligned the role, the better marketing capability development, the better revenue growth. Okay, so there's a connection between the way that the role is designed and the performance of that role. All right, so let's start by saying, what is misalignment? I have disaggregated. Think about this. We think about a CMO role, and it's all mushed together.
Yeah.
If you break up what a CMO role is, we break it up into its pieces and parts. What do we mean? We mean that you have the position, the attributes of the position, you have the attributes and characteristics of the person in that position, and then you have the context under which that position is performed. So let me give you, I'll use a football example, okay? I can use a 007 movie example, but let me use a football example. So to an undoctrinated football fan, let's think about Patriots circa 2015.
Yeah.
You have the parts, the positions. You have a quarterback, you have a punt returner, you have a linebacker. Okay, those are parts. You then have people who fill those roles. So you have Tom Brady, you have Gronkowski, and everybody else. You then have the context under which that role is that is performed. You have a coach. You have a team, the Patriots, not the Buccaneers, the Patriots.
Yeah.
And all of these things go together to affect the performance of the quarterback. Okay. So when they're misaligned, if I put Gronkowski in the quarterback role, what happens?
It'd be pretty bad.
Right. If I change out Belichick, what happens? So when you start looking at the pieces and the parts, then what we're looking for is alignment. So somebody who has the training, like a Tom Brady, to be effective in the quarterback position. So again, what I do when I explain this to executives is I have a big picture of a group of Patriots. Now, to me, I just see a group of 100 guys or 50 guys wearing the same uniform coming at me.
Yeah.
To a CEO, I could line up 100 CMOs. They're all the same. They're interchangeable.
Yeah.
And yet what you and I know is that you have one CMO position where the CMO, I'll use a financial services firm example. I'm not going to name the name, but they care not at all about marketing. And the CMO position is only responsible for nominal PR. I have another CMO role. It's an EVP role where the CMO is responsible, financial services as well, same industry.
Right.
They have actuarial responsibility, pricing responsibility. They manage thousands of people. They manage, of course, all the Marcom, but they're managing pricing. They're looking at distribution. They're looking at risk. They're being prepared to be a CEO. These are not the same positions, not the same types of CMO roles. And by the way, the people filling them have very different backgrounds. So you now start seeing how complex it is because the CMO position itself has tremendous variance.
You said, I think in the study of all the executive positions you've looked at, and you've looked at a lot, there's none with greater variance than that of the CMO. So I didn't want to jump the queue there because you were going to talk about this, but let's talk about this variance thing you're just going on.
Okay. So let me see how to explain this. So let me use as an example where role theory comes from. It comes from the theater. So let's think about James Bond, 007, the movies. They have the position of the roles of James Bond, Moneypenny, the villain, right?
Yeah.
And generally from movie to movie to movie to movie, they're somewhat similar. Okay,
Right.
James Bond always has to be able to run, always has to look good, has to be a little tongue in cheek, although there's a little variance in that, etc. Okay, CMOs are not like that. That's what's different is that the number and types of responsibilities assigned to CMO positions is greater, far greater than it is for CFOs across firms. So we did a study, it was published in Sloan, where we looked at CFO, CIO, CMO roles. We pulled out of job specs every single responsibility that the roles had, and we just did a count, and then so the count is far greater for marketers. Okay, that alone makes it difficult because one job let me use an example in higher ed. University CMOs are responsible for crisis management, like anti-Semitism on college campuses. Okay, this is a whole skill area. It's extremely difficult and takes training. A CMO of Best Buy, a CMO of P&G, they are not trained, nor are they worried about this type of regular crisis that can occur on a college campus. That makes that role different. The requirements, the tasks, the expertise needed to fulfill that job is quite different than it is in another environment. And so the breadth of tasks and responsibility is just greater than it is for other C-level roles. That makes it more complicated to understand and fill.
So I totally agree with you. And I think there's a lot of CMOs that are really good ones. I know they won't take the job unless they know they're walking into the right gig. But then in your study, you said there's a giant definition gap where 90% of CEOs say this job is really designed well, and 22% of the marketers say, no, I don't think so. This is a massive gap. I mean, it's like, it's a 4 times gap. How, like, let's talk about the gaps and the factors and how this actually happens. And then we can talk about what to do about it. But
all right, so Mike, there's two things. This is research that was done, I believe, by McKinsey, reported in Wall Street Journal. I think it's very interesting because you have, at one level, there's some insight in this number, and that CEOs and CMOs don't see CMO roles the same. CEOs are saying they're well designed, and CMOs are saying no, they're not. Okay.
yeah, I'm a genius for doing this design, and I hired the recruiting firm, and I got the CMO, and now the CMO is no good, and hence the clue reference about Colonel Mustard with the job spec. But yeah, let's talk about it.
So that says that there's a gap there. We'll talk about that, but there's a second insight in this data that I find very interesting, which is if CMOs don't believe that the role is well designed, are they talking to the CEO? Are they not negotiating the role up front? If they're dissatisfied with a role, if they think it's poorly designed, what do they believe is their role and responsibility in getting to an optimal design? And even if you step into a role and you go, wow, this isn't working.
Right.
So I am about empowering CMOs and giving them knowledge and insight so that they can design better roles up front. But importantly, if you're stuck in a bad role, you don't fill out on a survey, I don't have a good role. You try to take steps to shift, navigate, negotiate, et cetera, out of that bad position. So there's two things going on. So why is the gap existing? I think the reality is that CMOs and CEOs are not experts at designing or understanding or accepting good jobs.
Yeah.
CEOs, how many CMOs are CEOs going to hire in a lifetime? I don't know, 3, 4, 5, I don't know. They're not experts yet. They have a lot of other responsibilities. CMOs, how many times are they really going to interview and accept jobs? Their job is to figure out how to be a good marketer, not how to be a good interviewer and negotiator of roles. They are not expert. The experts in all of this are executive recruiters. And so
do you roll HR in with that in addition to executive recruiters? Because I would say I can't just stick it on the executive recruiter, because sometimes the HR department, especially for small companies, running the whole show here, right?
I would say so, but I'm going to place most of the responsibility on the executive recruiter. Here's why. They're the ones hired for hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars to be the experts at finding them. HR acknowledges, CHROs acknowledge, they also are not experts on CMO roles. They have to manage all of the human assets in their company. So they're not experts on CFOs, CIOs, CMOs, et cetera, any more so than VPs or directors. And so the one group that's hired to be expert at this are executive recruiters who technically have studied and understand all the different types, who understand how to write a job spec that accurately reflects the role and helps identify the perfect fit candidate. They're the ones who ultimately are held accountable for, there's a guarantee of a year or 2 years if the candidate doesn't perform. So I still place a lot of responsibility on executive recruiters. That's their full-time job. And if they're in this space, then they're saying, I'm an expert at hiring these type of positions.
So, and in here, you talk about the factors of design and operation that go sideways, that create the whole, this massive gap. And I think you broke them into responsibility, experience, and status. Give our listeners the cliff notes of those things, because what you're saying is the search firms maybe not doing it. The HR department can't, the CMO probably can't, the CEO can't. Let's put it out there so everyone can take their best shot at these 3 things.
Okay, so first of all, let me also say, I don't think any of this is malicious. It's not like anybody's not trying to do their job or trying to do a bad job. I think it's understudied, it's misunderstood, And so I think it's just a lack of knowledge. All right, so let me tell you what we did in this academic research is the first thing is we have a huge conceptual framework and model for the role, the pieces and parts, okay? A lot of different variables that help explain how a CMO can have better or worse performance outcomes, okay? Then we just took 3 attributes of the model that represented each of the 3 buckets. One that represented the position, that's responsibility. One that represented the CMO person, that's the type of training and experience they had. And then one that represents the context, and that's the status afforded the position. More or less status than other players, other C-suite players. So we look at the interaction of these 3 and their effect on marketing capability development and revenue growth. All right, so we just looked at those 3. And what we found, like you said, are that most jobs are misaligned, 54% of the study. And what we find generally is that, well, I'm not going to get into the details because it's a little too complicated for a short answer. Let me talk about what I find most interesting.
Okay.
Is that what we find that the nature of the responsibility set, whether it's relegated to just core marketing activities like marketing communication, or it's broader, the nature of the fit of the type of responsibility with the fit of the CMO experience, when you add status, when those 2 things fit, so the type of experience that a CMO has fits with the responsibility set given to the position, when that fits, when you add status, the positive outcomes are amplified. So if I have, I'm going to say, if I have a general management trained marketer, a P&L trained marketer who has a broad set of responsibilities that goes beyond marketing communication, that's a fit. When I give that position more status, you get better firm outcomes. When I give it less status, you get worse firm outcomes. But here's what's interesting. What happens when you have a misfit? So let's say I have a broad set of responsibilities, okay? They're responsible for pricing and distribution and a broad set. Right. And I have a staff-trained marketer who is really focused on, let's just say, downstream marketing, communication, promotion stuff.
Yeah, or just or just pure brand building, not P&L. Yeah.
Right, so it's a misfit. When you give them more status, so that you get worse firm outcomes when it's a misfit. When you give them more status, you amplify the negative outcomes. So giving a misfit more status hurts firm outcomes even more. So this shows, I would have thought, okay, in my heart of hearts, that more status for marketers is always better. That's not true. If you put Gronkowski in as quarterback, and you say it differently, you put Tom Brady in as punt returner. Yeah. And you give that role even heightened responsibility and status, or I should say status, the outcomes are even worse. If you marginalize
Julian Edelman gets really mad. Yeah. So, yeah.
Exactly. So I think, in hindsight, it makes sense. But when I started, you start with some biases. My bias was that more status is always better for CMO role. That's not the case.
Because with status goes expectation, or with status also goes a belief of incompetence if you can't run that with the peer group. So is that a good way to look at it? Which is, if I am brought in and I have all this responsibility and all this status, and then I can't run it, I am not just failing in my job, I'm losing status for the whole department emotionally around the C-suite. Is that right?
I really would say it's a competency issue, right?
Yeah.
And so what's going on is that I need a quarterback. And now I'm way out over my skis in terms of I don't understand football. I should have used basketball terms. I understand that much better. But if I bring in the wrong experience, like let's say I have an offense that's a running offense, but I bring in a quarterback that's a passing quarterback, we have a problem. There's a misfit in the competency and the skill and expertise of the quarterback to be able to fill the needs of that position in that on that team. And so when the misfit happens, to your point, it doesn't just blow back on a perception that the CMO is bad. It can spill over onto the perception of the value and capability of marketing in general. And so I want to say something here that I think it goes back to one of the very first things you said when we started. What do we do? When I work with executives, I start with this question. I say, okay, you have a situation, you're at the C level, and somebody underneath you is not performing well, right? That's always the assessment. The assessment is they're not doing well. I said, what do you do? The answer is always performance improvement plan, move them, fire them, coach them. Okay? I said, but we're going to go back to the beginning. Have you actually set the role up to succeed? Right? And so the answer to your point is the outcome assessment when things aren't right is always that it's the person's fault. But if what happened is that you needed a passing quarterback and you hired a running quarterback, you've got a miss. It's not that
You
the
set yourself up, you shot yourself in the foot, and then you blamed the choice that you made as the problem. And then if you do it 2 or 3 times in a row, your marketing is totally screwed up, and your company's view of marketing is probably that it totally stinks. And it's wasting tons of money. And because, you have this running quarterback who can't throw the ball. And so, it's clearly the quarterback's fault when you're saying it's the system.
Well,
And you are not curing the problem. You are actually exacerbating the problem.
so there's a great quote from Urban Meyer, who, when he moved into the pros, his team was failing tremendously. And there's a beautiful quote, and I'm going to paraphrase it because I will not do it accurately, but he basically said, they're terrible. They're terrible. Everybody's underperforming. And somebody in the media said, well, who hired all of these losers? He was talking about all the coaches. The coaches are terrible. And he said, well, who hired all of these losers? Right? It reflects the paradigm. In my position, when they don't perform, it's their fault. But we, as architects of the role, we decide what responsibility to give them. We decide what skill set I need to hire to fit that responsibility. And then I need to give it appropriate status and the appropriate environment in which to succeed. I own that. So as we're trying to figure out what's not working, why is it? The easy answer is they fail. Well, even if they're failing, let's say that means that you didn't hire somebody who has the competency set, the experience to fit into the position. You need to go back and say, how did I miss the mark? How did my executive recruiter miss the mark? Because I don't want to do it a second time and a third time and a fourth time.
Yeah, and that is probably first advice. Look in the mirror and see it may be you. I have a question here. Let's say that we'll take the search firms out of it. We'll also take the if I'm interviewing for a job, and I've thrown away the job spec. What are the 2 or 3 questions I should ask to see if I'm going to fit the team offense?
That's a great question. So the first thing I say is throw away the job spec. The job spec, think of it as a promotional ad sheet.
Yeah, go look, it gets you in the door. 50% off. All right, you're in the door.
Exactly. So throw it away. So the first thing I would do is I would say, help me understand what the responsibilities, expectations, and accountabilities are. Is there alignment? By the way, in the Sloan document, I have a tool that I use with executives on how you can disaggregate the pieces and parts. Okay. So what I would do is I would pull out and say, help me understand tell me what I own. Do I own data analysis, or does somebody else own that? Do I own R&D, or does somebody else own that? Do I own pricing, or does somebody else own that? Go through, what is it that you own? Okay. Help me understand what I own. Then say, what am I held accountable for? Okay. So think about this. You own growth. Great. You just told me I don't own R&D.
Yeah, I don't own
I don't
pricing.
own
I
pricing.
don't own, I
I
don't
don't
own
own,
all this other stuff.
I
Yes.
said, so you do understand that growth comes from decisions around pricing, decisions around the innovation platform, strategic positioning of the firm. You just told me I don't own any of those. How can I possibly be responsible unilaterally for growth outcomes? So now all of a sudden you can start kind of matching stuff. So the first thing I would do is I'd ask questions around what's the responsibility? What is success look like? How are you going to measure me? I would also ask for show me the org chart. This happened to me. I was told I owned something, and then when I got in, a whole department was parallel to me. I didn't own it. And so I spent a year trying to move it over.
Yeah, a
Okay.
lot of times there's shadow orgs that are doing the work already, and they're not going to give up any power. And I think the org chart thing is really great. I will say, I think your advice on throw away the job spec is great. The other thing I have always done is I run sample big decisions by who is the final decider.
Yes.
Capital money, creative decision, the hiring, budget allocation. Like, do I own it or are people just checkboxing me? Because if I don't own it, I'm not taking the job.
Well, yeah, you can't hold me accountable for the results. And so that's a managerial discretion. What is my authority level over what types of decisions? Then the last thing I would say, Mike, is you must write this down. Okay, so I was told at one company I owned something I didn't. At another company, I asked that question. I said, do I have the authority to change the organization
Yeah.
to hire and fire whomever I want? I get there. I wanted to make a change,
Exchange, yeah.
and the CEO said no. And so now the difference is I had written this down. So you write it down, say, thank you so much. Again, all of this is back end negotiation. Get the job offer. Don't negotiate before you get the job offer. Understand ahead of time. Once they decide they want you, then you step back and you go, okay, let's have a conversation about how we structure this role. And what's important here is that you want success out of this position. You need it. I want to work with you to design it in a way that makes sense so that you and I and the marketing organization, the firm, are most successful. So I know you're absolutely right. I think writing it down and after you have that negotiation discussion, you say, here's my understanding of what we just talked about. Here's what I own. Here's what's expected of me. Now you're writing your own job spec. Here's the level of discretion I have. Again, it doesn't mean, Mike, that when you get in, they won't change it. But now you have a piece of paper where they confirm, and you say, if any of this is incorrect, please let me know. Not, will you please confirm? Because they're never going to confirm. If it's incorrect, let me know. They don't fix anything or change anything. Now, when you get in, you have a piece of paper say, if you recall, when I came here under this assumption.
I think this is good. And what I'm going to call it is this is prevention versus cure. You get this all done, and then you don't have to have the fight after the fact when you get slammed. I think that's really a good way to get us to our traditional last question, which you are very familiar with now. Practical advice for our audience we haven't discussed yet, or the funniest story you can tell on the air. You can pick one or both, but you must pick at least one.
Well, I was going to say, we've already talked a little about this. I was going to say, normally I would not do this, but I would say for anybody aspiring to be a CMO or CMO, to read kind of the set of research. Okay, everything I've done is to try to help boards, CEOs, and CMOs better understand and leverage marketing for firm advantage. And I do think all of this is around how do we get to better roles? How do we set CMOs up for success? So the one thing I would say is if you get a chance, scan it. The UVA has been kind enough to pay for open access to the academic article is free. HBR and Sloan, there's always some sort of subscription. But I would encourage folks to read it. But I want to end on I'll end on a funny story because it relates to what we were just talking about. You just sparked my head. So, by the end of my career, I had finally figured out that I was not negotiating or understanding CMO roles. So every time, I would re-interview, I would fix mistakes I'd made in the past. And so in my last role, I negotiated discretion, right? So I want to understand, can I hire, fire? Can I change the organization? Da, da, da. Yes, of course you can. So I put it down in paper, etc. So I get a call. I've only been there like 3 weeks, and I get a call from the CEO's admin that one of my people was going to be meeting on a topic that was in my responsibility set. She was invited to the meeting with the CEO and the other team, and I wasn't. And I just assumed at that time that it was a mistake. He forgot I was there. And so I called up the admin and I said, is just FYI, was I left off? And she goes, no, he said not to include you in this.
Oh,
And what I realized, so here's what happened. I'm walking down the hallway toward his office and I'm trying to think of how am I going to manage the situation. And he's walking to me. And in that moment, I realized he was playing a game. I could see it in his eyes. There was a power game going on, etc. And he said to me, he goes, I was wondering how long it was going to take before something like this would bother you. And I come from an environment where I would never do that. I would never go to two below, right, and ignore their boss and blah blah blah. And I thought, okay, I'm gonna call his bluff. I said, no, actually, I was coming to you, and I have a suggestion. I was thinking of spinning off that group. I don't think it fits with the rest of the marketing responsibility. And I would suggest if you want to manage it, that maybe we spin it off and have her report directly to you. And I said, that would allow me to focus on where the core problems are and you can manage it. Right. So what I'm subtly saying is, if you're going to make the decisions, then I'm not responsible for it. And but I could see what was going on. It also was an early indicator this was not going to be a really enjoyable experience because he was enjoying the game. I felt like I was a little mouse and he was a cat. Right. Now he and I ended up having a great relationship. That's not how I would lead or manage, but my point is that here's an example of where I did everything to try to be clear about discretion up front, and then I got to the job, and you still have to navigate problems.
It's never easy. I want to say, as I get to, because I think that's a great way to close the show, but we have talked football, 007, a little bit of basketball, all kinds of stuff. So a very wide-ranging show. And thank you, Kim, for joining us once again. And thanks to everyone for listening to CMO Confidential. If you are enjoying the show, hit the like button and subscribe. Look for all of our shows on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube, which include Marketing, The Battle Between Believers and Non-Believers, Parts 1, 2, and 3. A Perspective on Business Schools, The Race to Keep Up with the Market, The Case for and Against CMOs, and Kim's previous shows, which include The Budweiser Case and a comprehensive look at fixing the CMO position. Hey, all you marketers, stay safe out there. This is Mike Linton signing off for CMO Confidential. Legacy marketing tools weren't built for AI. Typeface is the first multimodal platform where agentic workflows handle everything from brainstorming to launch across every channel and customer touchpoint. Their AI native design transforms manual marketing tasks into automated workflows that create personalized text, imagery, and video at enterprise scale. Typeface's AI integrates with existing MarTech stacks through APIs and native connections. So you keep your processes while gaining AI superpowers and enterprise-grade security. See how brands like ASICS and Microsoft accelerate innovation and transform a single idea into thousands of personalized on-brand experiences instantly. Ready to see what marketing looks like when AI handles the heavy lifting? Learn more at typeface.ai/CMO.